All right, so hi everyone, welcome to session 5 of day 2 of the AANHPI Caucus Virtual Summit. Today we're here with Ahana, who is from California and will be talking to us about the past and future of AANHPI elected officials. I would love for her to quickly give an introduction if she'd like to, or go straight into her topic of the day. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Like Ankita said, my name is Alana Tayal, and thank you all just again so much for being here. I am a junior in high school from the Bay Area, California, and I just joined HSTA at the beginning of this year, late last year, and I've just so enjoyed my experience with this organization. I'm really passionate about civic engagement, especially the representation of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders communities in elected offices. So hence my presentation topic today. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. Let's see. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, as I already introduced myself, so we'll skip this. Today's presentation is designed to help us reflect on where the AANHPI community has been politically, where we are now, and where we hope to be in the future, as shaped by us. And so the structure of this presentation will follow a past, present, and future format. So we'll look at history, current data and issues, and how we can take action as teenagers. So, my icebreaker for us today is to start off with what percentage of elected officials in the US do you guys think identify as AANHPI? So, feel free to drop that in the chat and we can get started there. Oh, yeah. Ankita, go ahead.
I'd like to guess like 5%, but I feel like that'd be a really high estimate. I feel like it's more like 1 or 2, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. If any of you guys have an answer, feel free to unmute or drop in the chat. I just can't see the chat, so someone might need to tell me what numbers we're looking at.
Feel free to call on people too if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Um, Junia, what do you think? Okay, I don't know.
Wait,
Oh,
hi
yeah,
Key. I just got back from the bathroom. What is the question? I just heard my name.
no worries. Okay, the question is, can you estimate the percentage of AANHPI individuals in elected positions?
Is it like 3% maybe?
Okay, good estimate. I'll call on one more person. Saeed, what do you think?
I think Side is out right now. You might have to choose
Oh,
somebody.
sure. Anya, what do you think? No worries. Nathan, are you there? What do you think? Okay, no worries. I'll just continue on. So, okay. So, as of the most recent data, less than 1% of elected officials in the United States identify as Asian American, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander, which is pretty concerning considering that these communities make up about 7.2% of the US population. And so, according to a Reflective Democracy Campaign report that was published in 2021, AAPIs make up 2.8% of elected officials in the federal government, 1.6% of elected officials in statewide positions, 2.1% of elected officials in state legislatures, 0.5% of elected officials in countywide positions, and 2.4% of elected officials in citywide positions. And so, knowing all of this, it's important to note that Asians are one of the fastest growing racial groups in the United States and are projected to become the largest immigrant group by 2055. And without adequate representation, governments are unable to serve vulnerable communities like us with the cultural competency and language access that we require. So now I'd love to gauge everyone's just general knowledge of AANHPI political history. And so I'll ask a few questions that you guys can either answer by unmuting or dropping it in the chat. So my first question is, who was the first Asian American elected to Congress? And so yeah, either unmute or drop it in the chat, whatever works.
I think I know this one.
Oh,
Yeah,
Ishan, go for it.
go
Ishan.
ahead.
Was it Dalip Singh Sandh or something like that?
You are correct. Next question. When were Asian Americans first allowed to become US citizens?
1920, 1925.
Okay, good guess. Anything else?
I don't have an exact guess, but I think I'm with Ankita. I think it's in the 1920s, but I'm gonna guess later, like 1927.
Okay. If someone else has a guess, another guess, I'd love to hear it. Um, let's go back. Kyle, do you have a guess?
I'm gonna say 1921.
That's 21. Okay, so you guys are all a little bit off. So Asian Americans, immigrants, sorry, were first allowed to become US citizens in 1952, actually, with the passage of the McCarran-Walter Act, which lifted racial restrictions on naturalization. And so, I don't know if this is working. My last question for y'all is, which AANHPI leader co-authored Title 9? And if anyone has a guess, feel free to do the same.
I have a feeling it's like Jill Takuda, Judy
Okay.
Chu, Mark Takano. I really have a feeling it's them, but I might be wrong.
Okay. Anyone else have
This
a
is
guess?
19 this is 1970s, right?
I believe so, yeah. Something around
I
that. Might be a little earlier. Ishan, do you have a guess?
I have no idea. Yeah.
Honestly valid. Okay, so since no one seems to know, I'll just go over it. So Patsy Mintz, the first woman of color, I believe, of Hawaiian descent in Congress, and the first Asian uh, American woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, co-authored Title IX, the landmark law that prohibited sex-based discrimination to federally funded education programs and activities. And so all of these trailblazers, which we'll kind of look at later, shaped pivotal roles in breaking barriers and shaping US policy. And so now we're going to discuss some systemic barriers. So, historically, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities have faced significant legal and social barriers in the United States. One of the earliest and most infamous policies was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which I'm sure we've all heard of in our US history classes. But just to kind of discuss it a little bit more, it prohibited Chinese immigration, but also barred Chinese immigrants from becoming US citizens. And so this law was one of the first to exclude an entire ethnic group from entering the country, and it was just truly based on race, and it reflected the deep-seated anti-Asian sentiment which was prevalent at this time. And so the Chinese Exclusion Act lasted for decades and remained in effect until 1943, which is pretty crazy. And so that honestly created a legacy of exclusion and racial discrimination that will have long-lasting effects on AANHPI communities as we've seen today. And so, additionally, Asian immigrants have faced severe restrictions on naturalization, as we kind of discussed earlier. So, until the passage of the McCarran-Walter Act in 1952, which allowed Asian immigrants to become U.S. citizens, most Asian populations were barred from naturalizing, which is the process of becoming a citizen, and that left them in a state of permanent legal limbo. And so, even after this act, many states continued to implement policies that restricted the ability of Americans to own land and property, which further reinforced their second-class status. And so the most devastating manifestation of government-sanctioned racism also occurred during World War II, wherein over 120,000 Japanese Americans, most of whom were U.S. citizens or Nisei, were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in internment camps. And so this action was justified under the idea of national security and protecting America, but was also driven by racial prejudice and fear, and marked one of the largest and darkest chapters in US history, arguably. And so these historical injustices are truly key to understanding the struggles faced today by these communities as they lay the groundwork for the discrimination, racial bias, and exclusion that persisted throughout the 20th century and arguably the 21st. The legacy of these policies continue to affect these communities today because they grapple with the lasting impacts of exclusion, prejudice, and systemic racism. So despite this, though, the resilience of us in these communities has been evident through their ongoing fight for civil rights, representation, and equality. So now we'll discuss some trailblazers. So despite everything that I've mentioned today earlier, several trailblazers emerged who defied the odds and broke through significant racial and political barriers. And so one of them is Dalip Singh Sawd, which was already mentioned, and he was one pioneer. So in 1956, he became the first Asian American elected to Congress. And so he made history as the first Indian American and Sikh American to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. His election was a landmark achievement at the time because AANHPI representation in government was virtually non-existent, and so it marked the beginning of a more inclusive political landscape for Asian Americans. Patsy Minks, the only woman on the screen, interestingly enough, was the first woman of color elected to Congress, which was another trailblazer who championed civil rights for women and minorities. In 1972, she co-authored Title IX, a landmark law that prohibits sex-based discrimination in federally funded education programs and activities, like I previously mentioned during our icebreaker. And so this law revolutionized access to education for women and girls, particularly in athletics, and continues to be a pillar of gender equity in schools across the United States. So Minks' leadership, especially in the face of the systemic racism that she endured, made her an iconic figure in the fight for social rights and justice. And so the last key figure I want to mention is Daniel Inouye, a Medal of Honor recipient who became one of the longest serving senators in U.S. history. Inouye, who was born to Japanese immigrant parents, demonstrated immense courage and resilience during World War II as a member of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, one of the most prized units in U.S. military history. So he went on to serve in the U.S. Senate for nearly 5 decades, and he advocated for the rights of AANHPI communities and became a respected leader in the Senate. So his journey from a Japanese American person in an internment camp to the halls of Congress truly serves as a testament to the perseverance of these communities in the face of adversity. And so these pioneers not only broke through barriers and biases that really were attached to them, but they also paved the way for future generations such as us and of AANHPI leaders. So I know this list looks pretty exhaustive, but we'll just discuss a couple of them. So I think it's pretty interesting that Jimmy Carter signs the bill into law that designated the first week of May to be Asian Pacific American Heritage Week, which is interesting enough because we're in May right now and celebrating that month as we speak. And so later on, it was expanded to a full month in 1992. It was changed to Asian American Pacific Island Heritage Month in 2009, and then further updated in 2021. And then just some other figures to note that I didn't touch upon. So James Kano, a Japanese American, was one of the first selected mayors in 1957. Norman Mineta, another Japanese American, was one of the first Secretary of Commerce's in 2000. And then Pramila Jayapal in 2013 became one of the first South Asian women to serve in Congress. And then Tulsi Gabbard served as a U.S. representative for Hawaii's 2nd District from 2013 to 2021. And obviously, Kamala Harris became the first Asian American to become vice president. So, knowing this, I'd love us to reflect on kind of what really surprised us about this history, because I think it's really interesting and a lot of these things I hadn't known before I researched them. So I'd love for a couple of y'all to either unmute or drop it in the chat about a word that kind of captures your reaction to all of this.
I feel like not surprised, but I wish I was surprised. Surprised, but I wish I wasn't.
Totally. Yeah, I agree.
Like, why did it take us until 2013 to get the first South Asian women in Congress? Kind of insane, but
Yeah. Other thoughts? Kyle, what do you think?
Um, I think that, despite the great, I guess, advances we made so far, we still have a lot to go, especially with how you said earlier about how, a lot of our nation rapidly growing is becoming mostly, not mostly, but it has a really big growing ANHPI population. And, we have made some, great strides that you just listed, but there is certainly a lot more work to be done.
Yeah, no, totally. I definitely agree. Uh, Nithra, what do you think?
I think it's kind of inspiring. It kind of, encourages me to like look, kind of seek beyond, like how soon it took for, there to be representation within our political field. So it kind of, I don't know, it inspires me to encourage, the next generation of people to get, more involved, especially from underrepresented backgrounds.
Definitely, yeah. Uh, Ishan, do you want to share anything to add?
Yeah, sure. I was surprised to see, or I wouldn't say I was surprised, but it's kind of sad to see like the people that were elected, they were kind of elected from the same area of America. I live in North Carolina in a pretty red district, and like in our state, we have two NHPI or three NHPI politicians. So, I wish that we had more NHPI people and really just more representation around the country and not just on the West Coast.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. And that's honestly something I hadn't really thought about because I'm on the West Coast, so I love that. And that's something definitely that we should note. Yeah. Um, okay, let's move on. So, I know that it was kind of hard to hear about the history and kind of get bogged down by all of like the things about a lack of representation and how long it took us to get to a point where we're finally seeing some representation. But I'd love to kind of highlight some positivity and some recent gains that we've had in this 21st century. So today, on HPI, communities are seeing significant progress in representation, especially in political leadership. So one of our most notable figures is Kamala Harris, who was the previous VP, the first Asian American and first woman to become the Vice President of the United States, which is an incredible feat, truly. And so Harris, of South Asian descent, has become a symbol for breaking barriers for both women and her community in the highest levels of government. So her leadership has inspired a new generation of leaders who see themselves reflected in trailblazing roles. And so, alongside Harris, there's also figures like Senator Mazie Hirono and Representative Pramila Jayapal, who have made their mark in U.S. policy. And so, Hirono, a Japanese American, became the first Asian American woman elected to the U.S. Senate in 2012, and she's been consistently advocating for progressive policies related to healthcare, immigration, and women's rights. Jayapal, who represents Washington's 7th District, became the first South Asian woman elected to Congress in 2016. And so, as a staunch a staunch advocate for immigrants' rights, climate action, and economic justice, she has truly paved the way for more South Asians to enter U.S. politics, which I think is especially key to note, as Ankita mentioned that it's kind of concerning that we haven't seen a lot of South Asians in policy and American politics. So I think that's kind of interesting. And at the local and state levels, we see representation has nearly doubled over the last 20 years, which kind of reflects this growing commitment to diversity and inclusion. This rise in representation at the grassroots level is truly crucial for ensuring that all voices are heard in decision-making processes because they directly impact various communities, right? So as more individuals step into leadership roles, at all levels of government, whether it's state, federal, um, it really will help shape the landscape of American politics because it's becoming more reflective of our nation's diverse population, which kind of promises a more equitable future if we're thinking positively. So, to highlight some local involvement, I think progress for these communities is not only limited to Congress, although it's kind of what we would normally think. Local and state levels are pretty influential and are seeing a rise in these leaders who are shaping policies and advocating for change. And so, across the country, we see mayors, school board members, and state legislators making impactful contributions to their communities. So, in cities like San Francisco, where London Breed, a Black and Filipino American woman, serves as mayor, leaders are advancing progressive policies on affordable housing, police reform, and education. So, Breed's leadership to has helped push for initiatives that aim to reduce inequality, especially in communities that have been truly marginalized, as we've seen kind of in the history of San Francisco. So, also similarly, Boston's Mayor Michelle Wu, who is Taiwanese, has been at the forefront of advancing climate policies and economic recovery plans in the wake of COVID during the 2020-2021 era. And then um, also, we see school board members and state legislatures driving crucial reform. So, these voices ensure that the issues facing various communities are addressed with cultural awareness and sensitivity, which I think is important, and unique perspectives. So, by pushing for these policies that prioritize equity in education, healthcare, and housing, officials are changing the way that local governments approach these issues, which I think is definitely imperative. And so, whether it's expanding access to education in schools, ensuring language justice, that everyone has a voice, and tackling systemic racism, which is definitely hard to do, these leaders are reshaping communities from the ground up, which ensures more equity. And it also displays how local leadership can truly create a lasting change and create a more inclusive society. And so, obviously, despite these impressive feats to note, there are definitely some challenges today. So, despite all of the progress that has been made, there are still significant challenges that continue to impact these communities. And so, one of the most persistent issues, I think, in my opinion, is the model minority myth, which paints these individuals as universally successful, hardworking, and non confrontational, which I think kind of plagues us all in, whether it's in our schools, in areas where there are less on HPI people. And so I think it's definitely a plaguing stereotype, which kind of seems positive, is actually erasing struggles and disparities that truly hurt these communities, particularly across immigrant populations. And so it disregards the fact that these people experience like poverty, unemployment, and a lack of access to quality education, healthcare, and housing, just like other people. And so it also pushes and like creates pressure on individuals to conform to such unrealistic expectations, which kind of diminishes our ability to speak out and advocate for our own needs. And you can see that definitely with how hard it is to advocate for mental health and all of these types of issues. And so, in addition to that, these communities have seen a rise in hate crimes, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Asian American hate crimes have surged, fueled by xenophobia and racist rhetoric, which you can say that has been kind of like seen in Trump's administration, then and now. And so you can see that it's kind of like it was basically where like Asian Americans were wrongfully just blamed for COVID-19, which we can definitely see really impacted and hurt them. And so according to the Stop AAPI hate report, there were nearly 10,000 reported incidents between 2020 and 2021 alone. And 10,000 is insane. That's quite a large number. And so these acts of violence and discrimination have left these individuals feeling unsafe in their own communities, hated, and the emotional and physical toll on these communities has been really devastating. And so while after 2021, I would say you could see like an increased awareness and legislative action to address hate crimes. There's still so much work to be done to combat racism and xenophobia directed at these groups. And so you can see that another challenge for these candidates who are running for office, who are brave enough to step up and kind of, despite, the minority, the model minority myth and all the hate crimes and racism and the racial biases, they step up and take that step of faith to run for office, they're still impacted and negatively disadvantaged by a lack of funding and networks. Because a lot of these individuals, because they're from immigrant or working class backgrounds, they break into politics, but it's like without like a financial backing or political connections, it's very hard for them to basically take back their power in a sense and compete against incumbent candidates. And so political success in in America in general often requires, extensive fundraising, access to these influential networks, and media visibility, which can be out of reach for a lot of potential candidates from these groups. And so the lack of support creates barriers to entry. And so although they might be highly qualified in their community, they're unable to run for office just because of a lack of resources. And so another thing to note with that is that they can face challenges with getting their message across due to, racial and cultural biases because these politicians navigate like a dense political landscape that isn't always receptive to their ideas just because of the way they look. And so because we're also often seen as like an other in American politics because we don't look like the person next to us. And so this can kind of result in, although they might have great ideas, result in like their policy platforms being ignored or misrepresented or kind of twisted in American media. And so cultural and landscape barriers can kind of prevent these candidates from connecting with a broader electorate as well, because, it can be difficult to build a big coalition and support in American politics without kind of being able to communicate with constituents and kind of be seen as reflected as one of them. So these barriers highlight the need for greater investment in mentorship, as well as political infrastructure and community engagement to ensure that these individuals have the resources and support to succeed in a political career if we want to kind of change America today. So next, I'd like us to play a quick little game. So I'll show y'all 3 pictures of current leaders and let's see if you can name them. So the first one we have is this lovely lady over here. Does anyone know who she is?
Can you give
Is
a
that
hint?
Michelle Wu?
Oh.
It is Michelle Wu.
Oh.
We're gonna say-
Okay, Jinya actually ate that up. Never mind.
Okay. And I think we should all know this next one.
Senator Andy Kim.
Kim.
Yes, sir. If you guys went to the great event yesterday, you would have recognized him. And last but not least, anyone know her?
Tammy
Representative Tammy
Duckworth. That's
Duckworth.
my senator.
Duckworth? Yes. Okay, so if I'll just kind of briefly go over these people if you don't recognize their names. So Michelle Wu, like Junia mentioned, is the first woman and first Asian American elected as the mayor of Boston. So she's known for progressive, broad policies, including fair, free public transit and climate justice initiatives. And Andy Kim is currently serving as a U.S. Senator who's representing New Jersey. He took office in 2024 and became the first Korean American to serve in the U.S. Senate and the first Asian American senator from New Jersey. And then last but not least, Tammy Duckworth, a Thai American and Iraq war veteran, is a U.S. Senator, and she's the first senator to give birth while in office, which is quite crazy, and a powerful advocate for veterans' accessibility and on HPI issues. So, I'd love to hear what y'all think about how their identities as coming from these communities and their backgrounds have shaped their leadership and kind of thoughts towards policy and all that kind of stuff. So feel free to unmute if you have any thoughts.
I definitely think that like there's certain values that people instill, especially as like of Asian communities, like, oh, like do your best, like work hard. All of those things are very like reminiscent of most any, even like all across the diaspora. So I feel like that's definitely one that you can think about in terms of like what may have shaped their idea of service. Like for example, I think South Asian communities have like a very like close relationship with service because of like stuff like seva and stuff like that. Obviously, it doesn't relate specifically to these politicians because I'm pretty sure they're all not of South Asian descent.
Yeah.
But that has been something that I've heard cited from South Asian politicians as to why they run for office, which is a really interesting thing to hear.
Yeah, totally.
I can speak a little bit about Duckworth since she's my senator. So, Duckworth is Thai Chinese, and she's been a lot more intentional than any of our other Illinois congressional delegation members about reaching out to AANHPI communities. Like she's met with different AANHPI organizations like domestic violence prevention orgs and other CBOs to make sure that their voices are being accurately represented in the decision-making process. And she actually co-introduced the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which was the pinnacle of the Stop AAPI hate movement with Senator Hirono from Hawaii. So she's been very forward about leading change in the Senate in relation to AANHPI issues.
And Zaid, I think you unmuted at some point.
Obviously I'm not very familiar with Michelle Wu, but I do keep up with Boston politics. And obviously when you're looking at major metro cities, a large amount of people who take public transportation tend to be immigrant, especially first generation immigrant workers. And you can see this in several metropolitan cities within the United States and within Canada as well, where a lot of the Asian candidates who run for office, a major talking point for them tends to be improving public transportation, including busing.
Totally. Anything else to note? I don't think anyone else unmuted, so we'll go ahead and keep pushing. So, okay. To kind of talk about the future, obviously the youth are kind of always seen as the future, and there's definitely new voices in American politics that I'd love to kind of talk about. So, the future of on-HPI representation and leadership is undeniably bright, and much of this progress is being led by youth. Youth-led organizations, groups like Run AAPI and hashtag Stop Asian Hate have emerged as, powerful voices and forces in American media that are shifting conversations from things like racial justice, equity, and our rights. And so, by leveraging social media, which we're all on, and grassroots activism, these organizations have mobilized thousands of young people to advocate for systemic change and raise awareness about challenges faced by these communities. And so, their efforts often have proved that youth activism is not only a catalyst for social movements, but can also be a critical component in shaping our future political landscape. And so these youth-led organizations are inspiring young leaders to step up and get involved in public service and politics. And so a lot of these organizations have created platforms for the youth to voice their concerns, amplify their stories, and participate in the political process, which I think is definitely key to increasing representation. And so, through initiatives like advocacy campaigns, workshops, and leadership training, young people are gaining the skills and confidence necessary to run for office, which is allowing them to, contribute to their communities, represent marginalized groups, and take on a leadership role. And so this sense of empowerment is crucial because it helps create the next generation of leaders who will continue to break barriers and amplify the voices of their communities. And so, moreover, these youth-led movements are reshaping how these communities engage with national issues. And so, through these campaigns like hashtag Stop Asian Hate, young activists have, challenged longstanding narratives and fostered solidarity and camaraderie across racial and ethnic groups. And so, this shift is not really only about advocating for their rights, but about building coalitions and stronger bonds with other marginalized communities who can often empathize with the things that others are facing as a group of immigrants in a broader sense. And so, as the influence of youth activism grows, it's clear that the next wave of their leadership will be diverse, dynamic, and committed to shaping a more inclusive and equitable future, like I've mentioned before. And so, it's clear that we'll need some things for a strong future. And so, for these communities to continue to make strides in political representation, it's pretty imperative that they focus on issue driven platforms. Because while identity is important, it can't be the only focus of leaders looking to address real world issues and the needs of their communities. So, these leaders, it's important for them to kind of move beyond the symbolic representation and also focus on prioritizing policies that address issues that voters care about, like economic justice, healthcare access, affordable housing, education reform. So, by focusing on these issues, leaders can build a robust and inclusive platform that resonates with more than just their community, and so like a wider electorate, which creates real lasting change and kind of puts them into office. And so the ability to create a platform that will respond to the need of an entire community rather than just being solely based on one's identity will be kind of key to gaining support from diverse voter bases, which will often put someone into office. And so, like I kind of mentioned before, these leaders must foster and create bonds with other marginalized communities to advocate for collective goals. And so, building alliances with African American groups, Latino, Indigenous Americans, and other historically oppressed groups is crucial for advancing policies that in a whole represent racial and social equity. And so marginalized communities often share common and similar struggles, whether it's access to quality education, healthcare, or protection from discrimination or xenophobia. And working together, as we've kind of heard, often strengthens one's goals and can increase one's power in a sense. So, it kind of ensures that no community struggles are kind of ignored in the broader fight for justice. It's really not enough for these leaders to solely focus on their communities because collaborating with others will allow them to leverage the collective strength for larger systemic change. And so, lastly, the future of this leadership hinges on mentorship. So, the next rise and generation of these leaders won't be able to do it by themselves. There needs to be a network of established leaders who can guide and inspire them. So, mentorship allows young leaders with the tools to give them the tools and insight needed to navigate the complexity and difficult like space that is public office and can help them with fundraising and policy development as well as community engagement and coalition building. So, established leaders who have experienced firsthand the challenges of breaking into politics are able to uniquely provide valuable guidance to these young leaders and ensures that the pipeline for future politicians remains strong. So, by investing in the mentorship programs and creating spaces for learning and growth, these communities can ensure that future leaders are well equipped to continue breaking down barriers and advancing change. And so there's also leadership programs such as the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies and the Conference of Asian Pacific American Leadership that play a large role in creating the next generation of leaders. So these programs provide young individuals with the tools and resources needed to kind of balance and navigate the political landscape. So they offer internships, fellowships, and leadership development programs for young individuals to gain experience. And so, by connecting emerging leaders with well seasoned leaders, they're able to empower the community to actively participate in shaping policies that affect their lives. And so, CAPAL focuses on cultivating a pipeline of leaders who are equipped with the necessary skills, knowledge, and network to kind of pursue a career in government, nonprofit sectors, and beyond. And so leadership programs like these are essential truly to mitigating and addressing the underrepresentation of these communities in public office. So, through mentorship, advocacy training, and networking opportunities, both of these groups and others alongside them help young people understand the intricacies of public service while breaking down barriers that prevent these candidates from succeeding in politics. And so, by offering hands on experience and professional development, individuals who might otherwise struggle to find support and community in these groups are able to kind of be able to grow in these political spaces. And so they're now more well prepared to make meaningful changes within their communities and the broader political landscape. And so, the next thing I wanted to kind of do is kind of think about a future you. So, imagine it's 10 years from now and you yourself are a leader, whether it's in government, education, or activism. And so, I'd love to hear about what issues you guys would focus on first.
I think the first thing I would do would be invest in the arts and humanities because I'm gonna be real. A lot of the yes, the biggest reason why the rise of anti-intellectualism and all of this is because we so devalue education as a society. Like, what other society on earth is like, oh my gosh, nerds are gross, nerds are uncool, nobody likes you. You're literally essentially devaluing intellectualism, and this is the product of it. Like, we've had like generations of people just saying, oh well, you're doing academia, how weird, how gross, why don't you want to be like a celebrity or something? So we've started like literally valuing that over things, I guess, not that those I guess don't matter, but like things that could be better served with our time, such as like actually educating people to understand their lives, and then also like building talents such as like being able to understand music, for example, or draw or paint or create new things, because obviously that also empowers people to think that they can actually create something in their actual own world. And my involvement in the arts has fueled why I go into public policy. So I feel like if I hadn't had that, I probably wouldn't be doing as much as I do now. So
Yeah. No, I totally agree that your experience, like, and what you do currently will kind of fuel what you want to accomplish and achieve later on. So I definitely agree with that. And I also see in the chat that we're seeing education and rehabilitation in prisons, which I think are great ideas as well. And I think those are necessary issues that we need to tackle. Um, oh, Zaid, do you have something to add? I don't know. Okay, we'll continue on. Okay. So that's pretty much the basis of my, and to conclude my presentation, we explored the journey of representation in elected office, from the barriers and biases that like kind of really silence these voices and to the strides that are being made today. So we acknowledge progress. More leaders are in public office than ever before. There's larger visibility and stronger community engagement, but there are also persistent challenges like the stereotypes, hate crimes, and systemic barriers. But looking ahead, we've discussed how each of us in this group and beyond as youth can play a role. And so whether it's through civic engagement, mentoring, or advocacy, or just getting involved yourself in public office, we can together build a future where these voices are not just heard, but are empowered to lead. So, one last thing, I'd love for us to kind of discuss what action can you take this year to support this representation, whether it's by voting, volunteering, or just sharing what you've learned today. So, either drop it in the chat or feel free to unmute and share. Allison, how about you go for it? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay, don't worry. Well, I currently work with a nonprofit that's fighting like stigma in Asian communities, like not only just like racial stereotypes, but also like mental health, which is frequently seen as taboo in Asian communities.
Yeah.
So I guess I continue like furthering my like work with them and like volunteering with maybe local organizations. So
Yeah. Awesome. I definitely think that's important. I see committing to backing this leadership on all levels, which I think is incredibly important as well. Um, Kyle, how about you share? What do you think?
I think maybe it'll be ending up with turnout. Of course, I think especially with my family and I think a lot of others too. I think civic engagement, especially with voting, it's not seen as a priority. When it maybe isn't as much as other things, but it certainly should be important. So I think talking to our families, our friends about why, going out and casting your vote is important will be, I think, something I'll take up on next year, next year, and as time goes on.
Yeah, great. I think that's an awesome idea. And yeah, not can't vote yet, but definitely want to help campaigns of these leaders. I definitely think that's important as well. And that was something that came to my mind as well. So I'll conclude my presentation here and thank you all so much for listening.
All right, thank you so much, Ahana, for an amazing presentation. Seriously, great job. This concludes session 5 of day 2 of our AANHPI Virtual Summit. Stay tuned for session 6. All right. Okay, stop recording.